You've probably seen the meme. Pepsi once had the sixth largest navy in the world. It's one of the most shared fun facts on the internet, and it's wrong. The real story is stranger. In 1989, the Soviet Union paid PepsiCo with 17 submarines and 3 warships. The CEO picked up the phone, called the National Security Advisor, and said, "We're disarming the Soviet Union faster than you are, but here's what the meme doesn't tell you." Pepsi never wanted those ships. They wanted vodka. This is the story of a 30-year love affair between a soda company and a superpower, and how it ended with the most absurd trade deal in Cold War history. By the end, you'll understand why winning every battle doesn't mean winning the war. July 24th, 1959. Moscow. The Cold War is at its peak. Nuclear annihilation is a daily possibility, but both sides have agreed to a cultural exchange. The Americans will build an exhibition in Moscow, 450 companies donating products to show the Soviets how good capitalism is. In a model suburban kitchen, complete with washing machines and color televisions, Vice President Richard Nixon and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev are having an argument. The kitchen debate, capitalism versus communism, unscripted, heated. The cameras are rolling, and behind them, sweating through his suit, is a man named Donald Kendall. Kendall was 38, head of Pepsi's international division, a World War II Navy veteran who had worked his way up from a bottling plant. His colleagues thought this Moscow trip was a waste of money. His career was on the line. The night before, Kendall had cornered Nixon, begged him. "I told him, I've got to get a Pepsi in Khrushchev's hand, 'cause I'm in a lot of trouble at home." Nixon delivered. But here's the brilliant part that nobody expected. Kendall gave Khrushchev 2 cups, one with New York bottled Pepsi, one with Moscow bottled Pepsi. It was a trap, a beautiful one. Whichever cup Khrushchev preferred, Pepsi won. If he chose the American one, it proved American manufacturing was superior. If he chose the Russian one, it proved Pepsi could be made anywhere. Khrushchev took a sip of the Moscow version. Cameras flashed. He declared it very refreshing. The photo went worldwide. The Soviet premier drinking an American soda in the middle of the Cold War, smiling, one of the greatest product endorsements in advertising history. And Khrushchev gave it for free. His son, Sergei, later recalled the Pepsi smelled like shoe wax. Not exactly a ringing endorsement from the family, but it didn't matter. Kendall had his photo. His career was saved, and a 30-year relationship between Pepsi and the Soviet Union had just begun. 4 years later, he became CEO. At 42, there was one problem. Soviet rubles were worthless on international markets. You couldn't convert them. So how do you pay for millions of gallons of cola syrup? Barter. In 1972, Pepsi became the first American consumer product sold in the Soviet Union. The deal: Pepsi syrup for Submarine Solik vodka. Cola goes east. Vodka goes west. It worked beautifully. 73 Pepsi kiosks opened in Moscow. 4,000 bottles a day. By the end of the decade, Soviets consumed 1 billion servings annually. Michael Jackson commercials aired across the USSR. Insiders called it the Pepsi generation. If you're still watching, subscribe, because the deal that seems perfect is about to fall apart in the most unexpected way. Kendall had built something extraordinary, a capitalist bridge across the Iron Curtain. He maintained personal friendships with every Soviet premier from Khrushchev onward. He once said, "I have always believed that the stiff wind of free enterprise can help knock down even the strongest totalitarian wall." He was right, but not in the way he expected. December 1979, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. Overnight, Americans start boycotting everything Russian. Stolichnaya sales collapse. Pepsi's barter currency, gone. Think about that. A war 10,000 kilometers away just destroyed a soda company's payment method. Kendall needed something new, something the Soviets had that Americans would buy. He tried oil. Didn't work. He tried minerals. Too complicated. Then someone proposed something nobody had ever considered. What if the Soviets paid in military hardware? Spring 1989. PepsiCo signed one of the strangest deals in business history. The Soviet Union would hand over 17 decommissioned submarines and 3 warships, a cruiser, a frigate, and a destroyer. In exchange, Pepsi would keep shipping cola syrup. Each submarine cost Pepsi $150,000, the price of a nice apartment. For context, a new submarine cost $2 to $3 billion. Pepsi was buying scrap metal. Kendall picked up the phone and called Brent Scowcroft, the National Security Advisor. "We're disarming the Soviet Union faster than you are." Scowcroft's reaction is not recorded, but the quote became legendary. Now, the internet loves the claim that this made Pepsi the 6th largest navy in the world. Here's the truth. Pepsi never operated a navy. They were a middleman. The ships were immediately transferred to a Norwegian firm for scrap. As historian Paul Musgrave wrote, "The Pepsi Navy no more conferred military power than a rusting Model T could have been a Formula One contender." And the ranking? It would have been 7th, not 6th. Equal to India's, Pepsi never wanted to be a naval power. They wanted to sell soda. The submarines were a desperate substitute after vodka failed. But the story was too good, and the internet never lets accuracy get in the way of a great meme. Flush with confidence, Pepsi signed its largest ever Soviet deal in 1990, $3 billion over 10 years, including construction of 10 commercial tankers and freighters. It was supposed to be the crown jewel. December 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist. Kendall's quote says everything. "We had a multi-billion-dollar contract with a non-existing entity. 3 decades of relationship building, vodka deals, submarine deals, personal friendships with every Soviet premier. All of it evaporated. And then the cruelest twist, Coca-Cola, which had turned down the 1959 exhibition, swooped in. They'd been waiting, while Pepsi was locked into barter, deals with a dying empire. Coca-Cola was building relationships with the new Russia. Post-Soviet Russia chose Coke. Pepsi won every battle of the Cold War cola race. The kitchen debate, the first deal, the Vodka Years, the submarine fleet, and lost the war. Donald Kendall died in 2020. He was 99 years old. He started as a bottling plant worker, talked his way into serving Pepsi to a Soviet premier, built a multi-billion-dollar relationship with a superpower, accidentally acquired a navy, and watched it all collapse when the superpower did. Here's what I keep thinking about. Kendall spent 30 years building something nobody else could. First mover advantage, personal relationships at the highest level, a foothold inside the Iron Curtain, and none of it mattered. Because the ground shifted. The country he'd invested in stopped existing, and a competitor who had done nothing, who had turned down the same opportunity in 1959, walked in and took it all. Does that sound familiar? How many companies right now are building empires on platforms, partnerships, or markets that could vanish overnight? How many of us are Kendall, brilliantly executing a plan that depends on a world that might not exist tomorrow? First mover advantage isn't permanent. The ground can always shift. And the competitor who's doing nothing today might be the one who wins when it does. 17 submarines, 3 warships, $150,000 per sub. That's what it costs when your currency is worthless and your customer is a soda company. Kendall once said, "I have always believed that the stiff wind of free enterprise can help knock down even the strongest totalitarian wall." He was right. Free enterprise did knock down the wall, and when the wall fell, it crushed his deal underneath. A 30-year love story between capitalism and communism, From a cup of Pepsi at a kitchen debate, to a fleet of submarines nobody wanted, to a phone call with a dead nation. The meme says Pepsi had the 6th largest navy. The truth is stranger. Pepsi had a 30-year head start, the best connections in the Soviet Union, and a CEO bold enough to buy submarines with soda money. And it still wasn't enough. What are you building right now that depends on the world staying exactly the way it is? Think about that, because the ground is always shifting, and the story of Pepsi and the Soviet Union isn't really about submarines. It's about what happens when you bet everything on a world that's about to change. Speaking of bets gone wrong, on January 15, 1919, a warm winter day in Boston, a steel tank the size of a building ruptured without warning. 2.3 million gallons of molasses surged through the streets at 35 miles per hour. People hear molasses flood and think of something slow and funny. It was neither. It killed 21 people, and the company's defense? They blamed anarchists. The truth was far worse.